It's All Things Considered, and I'm Dave Lawrence. Tonight, the tour continues at the Palace in Hilo for a blues legend that we have had on before with us, and we're grateful to have again joining us today, the great John Mayall. Aloha, John. Thanks for taking some time. Hope you're doing good.
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Great to hear your voice again.
You've got a radio voice.
Happy advanced birthday to you as well. Just days from your 83rd birthday.
Thanks very much. Keeps going on.
It certainly does. You got Jay and Greg still in the band?
Absolutely, yes. A trio.
I was examining your life and thinking about the many different times that I've gotten to talk to you, trying to think of some things that we've not previously discussed. The importance of Alexis Korner and Cyril Davies opening a blues club. How does that factor into how things worked out both for you and the fermenting of the scene?
Well, I was up in Manchester, so it was obviously a new thing that was buzzing down in London, so they kind of kicked it off, and very shortly after, under Alexis's encouragement, I moved down to London and put my own band together.
I just had Jim McCarty of the Yardbirds on, and he was talking about the importance of Cyril Davies, and your name comes up when we talk about the Blues Breakers, you creating this influential band, and when it first began.
I had a band in Manchester called the Blues Syndicate, and we played the same clubs. Like I say, Alexis said I should come down to London, and the other guys in the band didn't want to go, so I put together a band out of London-based musicians.
One of the things that made those early years special, you got to back some of your blues heroes when they were making their first tours of the United Kingdom.
I was firmly established on the London blues scene, and I was probably the first choice that the agents thought of for being the backing band for the American bluesmen who were coming over there for the very first time. John Lee Hooker was the first one to come over, and then after that I worked with T-Bone Walker, Sonny Boy Williamson, Freddie King.
Tours?
Yeah.
How many dates?
30 days.
What sticks out about getting to work with John Lee Hooker?
It was a great honor, really, and you learn a lot along the way of what not to do and what to do. So, the thing I learned out of it most was the volume that we were playing at was quite unnecessary for backing someone who wasn't really playing that loud. So you learn a lot about dynamics.
And in that time, you begin to have almost like a rotating group of guys who would go on to be quite influential on their own. One of them, actually, is now a Honolulu resident, John McVie.
John McVie was basically the first bass player that I had in my band on a permanent basis. I think there was another bass player who used to work with Cyril Davies, and he wasn't available, but he recommended somebody who was just learning the bass. So he turned me on to John McVie. I think John was still at school. He was very young, and I had to get his parents' permission to, have him go on the road with us. I do remember that I had to convince his father and mother that he'd be taken care of, and he was in good hands.
It was after Clapton had quit the Yardbirds that he first briefly joined your band.
Yeah, he was with me for a year with a sojourn in the middle of it where he went off to Greece on that harebrained idea of his mates. They thought they were going to tour the world and turn people onto the blues, which was obviously a disaster. But Eric was with me for a year, basically, and he joined because I made him an offer because he knew what kind of music I was playing, and it was the kind of music he wanted to play that the Yardbirds weren't.
Prior to him going off to form Cream, Jack Bruce also ended up being part of your band.
Yeah, well, Jack came in at the point when Eric was out of the country on that Greece trip, so by the time Eric came back into the band, Jack was already a member of the Blues Breakers, so from that point on, the two of them got together, and the rest is history, so to speak.
Recently, some classic recordings were released. Live in 67 and Live in 67 Volume 2 featured 3 original Fleetwood Mac members all backing you. Peter Green, John McVie, Mick Fleetwood.
They were pretty crazy guys. There was a lot of drinking going on and lots of tomfoolery. They didn't really take it all that seriously, and they just wanted to have a good time. Peter Green was obviously more dedicated to the blues than the two of them were. They forged a friendship there that led to Fleetwood Mac. 2
of those 3 cats end up in Hawaii, huh? You got Mick over there on Maui and John here in the Honolulu area.
Exactly, yes. They've made their fortunes with Fleetwood Mac, and now they get to enjoy the Hawaiian sunshine.
And you mentioned it earlier, having some of these guys join the band at what seems like a really young age, and you told the great story talking to the parents of
John McVie.
John McVie's parents, right? You're talking to another cat who comes into the band at a very young age, 15 years old, Andy Fraser, who would go on to form Free.
He was a recommendation from Alexis Korner.
Did you have to go and talk to his parents, too, and sort of say, hey?
No, I don't remember anything like that.
15, too, man. That is young.
Yeah, 15 and very small hands. He had a kind of a small bass. bass guitar was rather small, I remember.
Mick Taylor, he ends up in the Stones, and before that, of course, ends up with you.
Yeah, I think he was 17 going on 18 when I first heard him, so he was probably 18 when he joined my band. You're talking about the three guitar players that people talk about most, Eric and Peter Green and Mick Taylor. They all had completely different styles. Mick Taylor was very much more into jazz than the other two were.
Recording with Paul Butterfield around that time, too.
Yeah, well, that was when Peter was in the band, so Peter and I were both very thrilled to be able to be asked by Mike Vernon to come and do that session.
Albert King, you've gotten to do a few different things with, including producing for him. Also some collaborations documented in Blues Alive.
We did get a chance to record an album with him, so I had total control about who we should be, because I always felt that a lot of Albert King's records all kind of sounded the same. So I just wanted to do something a little bit different, having given the opportunity.
Etta James, how does she factor into things for you, John?
She didn't like me at all. It grew out of the fact that she was on that all-star blues concert. Whoever put that concert thing together, they contacted the musicians to take part in it. There was Buddy Guy, Junior Wells, Albert King, Etta James, one or two others. So I had nothing to do with the payment, but because they apparently didn't get their money, they blamed me. So Etta James always had this grudge against me. She thought I'd been using her talents and cashing in on her performance.
Junior Wells, though, and Buddy Guy, they thought the same thing, or no?
No, I don't think so. Just Etta was the only one who really cropped up as being somebody who was hostile.
That's a good way of describing it.
And she could be hostile, too.
Oh, I have no doubt. Buddy Guy, where would you appraise his style when it came to working with him?
Great fun to work with, and you couldn't ignore his stage presence. I did learn a lot from him about use of a microphone and just not putting your mouth right on it. He could project his voice from a foot away from the mic and it would be heard. Thanks to him for that. Wonderful guy. I first met him before I was a professional musician. He came over on one of those blues packages to England and the continent. He was pretty young then, so he was rather shy at that point, and he was just mainly wasn't doing his own thing, but he was like more of an accompanist for the musicians on the package.
Sort of like you were doing.
Yeah.
We mentioned the producing aspect. One of the late great cats who did a lot of that, Alan Toussaint, he was a producer you got to work with.
Yeah. Certainly not my cup of tea, totally opposite to anything that I would come up with. So for me it was really an agonizing experience because he would only record you in his own way. What you wanted to play, he wasn't really interested in that. He was just using you as one of the other musicians in order to do his music and his tunes. An arduous business. We were in New Orleans to record it, and we were just hanging around most of the time waiting till he got in the mood to come downstairs to the studio and press some buttons. But it was really a waste of time. And there's not much of me on the album that came out. Not one of my favorite albums, but...
Does not sound like it.
It wasn't my idea in the first place anyway, but some management thought it would be a good idea.
Along for the ride, all-star cast, the late great Billy Preston, Gary Moore, also we've lost Johnny Lang, Steve Cropper, Steve Miller, Otis Rush, Jeff Healey, Billy Gibbons.
Everything was a highlight on that one. It was a great opportunity to have all those guys just play with me, and it was really pretty special. All the sessions were done one take.
Was that the only time you did something with Gary Moore?
Yeah, and that was sort of accidental. We were doing something in the studio downstairs in the building where he was working at the time, and he came downstairs, heard that we were playing there, so why don't you bring your guitar down, plug it in, and join us on this song? So he did that. He just broke up his own session just for an hour. I came down and did it.
You got to think for a lot of these cats, it's a really big deal for them to get that kind of opportunity.
Exactly. And then most recently, of course,
Joe Walsh.
Joe Walsh apparently wanted to play on my new album. Came to the studio and just dropped in and did his bit in one take. That's the way you should get your music done.
Right. Just hit it and quit it. I like that.
That's exactly right. You've got to catch that energy and the spontaneity of it.
Yeah, it's like fire. You got to get it while it's going.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk About That is the name of the record. It should be dropping in early 2017, right?
Exactly.
Tonight at the Palace in Hilo, Honoka'a People's Theater on Saturday, at the Blue Note Sunday. I'm hoping I can come over and record a short thing with you while you're in Honolulu. Would that be okay?
Well, of course, yes.
It's always a pleasure to get to talk to you. The great John Mayall. Really a treat to get you back on All Things Considered with me. I really do appreciate it, John.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome. Take care.
Yeah, you too.